The Gambling Files podcast presents Desert Island Discs with your host, John Bruford. Hello and welcome to The Gambling Files presents Desert Island Discs. It's a podcast offshoot which talks to the movers and shakers in the gambling industry about their moving and their shaking. Well, no, actually it's not that. It's talking to leaders in the gambling industry, influential people in the gambling industry, and some people who are just nice in the gambling industry about who they are. And they're stranded on a tropical island, key point, tropical island, if in case any lawyers are listening. And on their tropical island, they have to choose some luxury items to keep them sane. So they get to choose 3 albums, 3 books, 3 movies, 1 song, not on the albums, 1 pet, 1 object, 1 dessert, and 2 pieces of advice. And we'll come into more details about all of those things as we go along. On this episode, I'm delighted to say we're joined by the, what can I say, bearded and bald Andrew Rhodes, CEO of the Gambling Commission in the UK. I'm also slightly bearded and quite bald, so I'm just glad Finton's not here to make us feel like we should have hair. Right now, this is the norm. Andrew, welcome.
Nice to see you again, John. The beard's a recent addition. I'm reliably informed it's a phase I'm going through.
Okay. Mine is just laziness.
Mine might have similar origins.
Well, it's one of those things. I think as you get older, you realise that a beard can mean that you don't have to do anything with your nose hair.
Yeah, I'm probably not at that phase in my life, but...
Am I older than you?
I don't know, but I'd like to not talk about nasal hair if we can avoid it.
Okay, it won't be brought up again, but ear hair might come into the conversation later. Okay. I'm not making any promises here. So Andrew, you're stranded on a tropical island. All of your basics are taken care of. You've got fresh water. There seem to be delicious goats running around the place, and the fruit is plentiful. Somebody's very thoughtfully left some potatoes, probably. Shelter you found. You've managed to light a fire and all that kind of jazz. All the basics, you're sorted.
Okay.
This is about what do you want to wash up on shore to help you keep your shit together while you're isolated and alone. I mean, it's a big ask, isn't it? So let's kick off. Well, yeah, let's kick off. Let's kick off with the albums. What would be your 3 albums and why?
Okay, so I'll tell you the 3 albums. I don't listen to albums very often anymore because with the whole sort of Spotify streaming and everything, I've got really eclectic listening taste, but it's a good test, the 3 albums. So the 3 that I came up with that I do really like and go back to. The first is the Spaghetti Incident by Guns N' Roses. The second is Metallica, or just Metallica, depending on your preference. And the last one is Language, Sex, Violence, Other by the Stereophonics. The Spaghetti Incident, I bought it. So I bought the CD, as you did back in the day. My very first album that I ever bought was Make It Big by Wham, which dates how old I was at the time. So
about 84?
I think about maybe 85, I think. 84, 85. It's certainly mid-80s. That was on vinyl. that was the very first album I ever bought. The Spaghetti Incident, obviously, a little bit different in taste. It's sort of like it's a strange sort of compilation album, and I'm not like I was definitely not a metalhead or in stuff like that, but it's just a very random album of different songs and some sort of styles in there. And I'm really bad with lyrics, so I'm like my wife, my kids are really, really good at picking up lyrics, and they can sing along. I'm hopeless at this. I just never really discern lyrics from anything. So it's always about the melody and the musicality, and then that's sort of what I pick up. And I just really like the album. And I bought it. Must have been it'll be sort of early 90s, so early mid 90s when I was before I was doing my sort of GCSEs, etc. As it was, by then. And I just really liked it, and because it was one of those ones that I listened to over and over and over, and whenever I listen to it now, it sort of instantly takes me back to that time when, obviously everything is ahead of you, the weight of the world on your shoulders hasn't crushed your spirit yet, and I just like the album, and it's quite good fun. I mean, it's a bit sweary.
It's very sweary. There's one
The
song in particular, if I remember correctly.
attitude is not. It's actually not one of my favorite ones off the albums. It happened, but it's. I just like it, and you like what you like, and I didn't care about what anybody else thought about whether that album was good or not. Well, I just happened to like it, and it's stuck with me ever since. So when I think about albums that I used to enjoy listening to repeatedly, that I felt weren't the same all the way through. Because it's like I feel like it's some stuff's like the same song, just different ways. It's just
Totally.
very samey. Like I know Ed Sheeran is a very talented guy. I just don't. I just find it all a little bit the same, and so I just like the album. Yeah.
I have no idea about the nice Mr. Sheeran. I'm sure he's very kind to animals. But Guns N' Roses, you are very much talking my language because I still think Appetite for Destruction is one of the
That's a brilliant album.
all-time
Yeah,
great
it's
debut albums.
absolutely brilliant album that I still
It
listen to
it still sounds
now.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah, it's aged
The
really
energy
well.
is just unreal. But the Spaghetti Incident is really interesting because A, it was a really odd choice for Guns N' Roses to release.
Mm,
But B, it's got a really punk feel.
mm.
And they obviously so it's an album of covers. Um, and they cover a few punk songs on there. The one that you mentioned, actually, Attitude, was actually my favourite on the album because it's a Misfits cover. I love the Misfits. But when you find out who these bands love and who their influences are, it's really peculiar. But Guns N' Roses have a lot of punk influence. And when you hear it on an album like this, they're not trying to glam up those songs or anything. They're keeping the punk feel.
Yeah,
And
I just
there's
think
a
that's
real
why
rawness to it.
I just why I like it. It's just because the tracks are quite different to each other. That it's just got a different feel to it, and now I still like listening to it. I mean, yeah, when you listen to these things, it takes you back to it, so different time because especially if you listen to it loads as I did then. Um, it's just stuck with me. I just really enjoy it, and it was an unusual album, and it's not one that people talk about very much. I do sort of think Appetite for Destruction is a phenomenal album.
I think Spaghetti Incident followed Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, which were wildly overblown, massively overproduced, and I've actually got no time for them, which is really sad because I was really looking forward to them at the time. And Spaghetti Incident's almost the opposite of that. It sounds almost like they went into a garage and played some songs and happened to record it. And and
Yeah.
and that was how they sounded when they first appeared, and it felt like they'd gone
I
back to
think
that.
it sounds like they sort of just played what they liked and just
Mm.
enjoyed it, and it happens to work as an album. But
Yeah.
it's a funny one, and I vividly remember the cover, which obviously was a bowl of spaghetti, as in of the sort of Heinz variety. Um, and a friend of mine at the time nicked it for a bit. I think he might have even swapped something into the case and then admitted it, because it just we gave it back, but it just it'll be at my loft somewhere now because obviously everything's digital now. But yeah, I just think it's a good one.
Well, I think I was talking to my daughter recently because I was playing her. There's a Miley Cyrus cover of Heart of Glass by Blondie,
No.
and it's phenomenal. I mean, it is just unbelievable. I said to my daughter, that's what it sounds like when somebody loves a song.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a bit of that on the Spaghetti Incident.
Yeah.
Now, Metallica, aka the Black Album, if I remember
Yeah. The Black
correctly.
Album. Yeah. The Black Album.
Now this was a bit of a game changer for an awful lot musically. I mean, you can define thrash before this and thrash after this, and the world shifted a lot.
Yeah.
Rock changed, but I'm still a little surprised that this is a choice.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a lot of tracks off it that have been covered. I mean, Ed Sandman's been covered so many times by different people, and it still pops up regularly now. Um, I'd 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 been lent a Metallica album. I think it was something with puppets, and I remember the tracks that were on it.
Master of Puppets.
Master of Puppets, yeah, and it was too much for me. I didn't. It just felt like noise. I didn't really like it. And then when the Black Album came out, um, and I listened to it, it's well. I mean, I don't think this is. I'm not sure this is the right way of describing it. It's very accessible, and it wasn't just noise and just tons of swearing and just screaming and it, the the tracks are really nice. I really really like it, and Nothing Else Matters I think is probably my favorite of the
Well,
album.
it fits in with what you were saying about it's not the lyrics that engage you;
It's
it's
the
the
melody.
musicality,
It's the
and
musicality of it, and I
that
really, really
album's
like.
a
I mean, I
beauty
like
for
Enter
that.
Sandman as well, but it's been covered so many times with so many different
So
types of
as Nothing Else Matters, there's a Miley Cyrus cover of
yeah.
that as well.
Is it really?
Yeah,
Or
there
maybe
is.
Miley liked a bit of Blondie and Metallica. You never know. But it's just there are lots of tracks on it I just think are really good, and it's an album that stood the test of time as well.
Yeah, big time.
And I think it still works. And I've in various kind of playlists I've created. There are different tracks from the album in there. And again, though, I probably really listened to it maybe about the same time. Probably it's the Spaghetti Incident would
Yeah.
have been. It would have been round about the same time anyway. But it's one that I think I've just listened to over the years. This kind of because I don't listen to a lot of albums. My album choices, apart from obviously compilation ones you bought at a point in time, which you couldn't pick any of those. Um, they kind of perhaps stick at a certain point, with the exception of the later Phonics album, which I think is brilliant. I think it's a really brilliant album.
Well, you mentioned Master of Puppets there, which for a lot of people certainly was the definitive Metallica album. But that was at a time when they were constantly changing time signatures within the song. It was very stoppy start. It was super technical. I mean, they're amazing musicians.
Oh yeah,
But how far can you take that? And then I think the album before the self-titled one was And Justice for All, which is a tremendous album, and it has got a little bit of a foreshadowing of some of the Black Album. But for the Black Album, they just made everything simple again.
yeah, and
Let the songs be the songs.
I think it would, and it certainly would have opened them up because if
Hmm.
you, when you sort of see stuff on YouTube, not that I look at a lot of this, but when you see stuff on YouTube, it's this sort of stuff that they play because it's got a broader appeal. Now, for some people, they won't like that because they don't want things to have a broader appeal. They want them to be more selective. But I mean, that's a kind of it's a personal choice thing. I just really enjoyed it, and I still enjoy it now. And I still, it's the musicality of it. I just think is really good. I mean, that is one where I pick up a bit more of the lyrics because I'm just not very good. I'm completely deaf on one side, so I almost with music I almost feel it more than I hear. I mean, I don't, but that's probably one of the reasons why I'm less attuned to lyrics. So it's the musicality of the album that draws me in, and I just think it's a very good one, and it was massive at the time,
Huge.
it's really stood the test of time, which a lot of stuff does, but it maybe it becomes very over-era, whereas I think you could probably release that today and it wouldn't seem crazy or really out of place. I mean, obviously,
Oh,
it
I think that's fair.
wouldn't be sort of popular music in that sense, but it wasn't then. It was,
But this was the album that launched them into the absolute stratosphere.
yeah,
This is the album that made them into a proper stadium band.
yeah,
I saw them, and it was one of the first gigs they did after releasing this album. I saw them Monsters of Rock in Donington. Must
yeah.
have been '91. So I was like, I was in one of the first crowds to hear Enter Sandman live because they opened with it,
Yeah.
and it was a weird thing. They had such a devoted following, right? So you're at Monsters of Rock, and there's like 10 bands on throughout the day, and I've been to a couple of others, right? And whoever's headlining, there's always this huge mix of t-shirts. Like it's not all about the headliner. Everybody's there for everybody, kind of thing. Because at that time it was one stage. But when Metallica were there, I'd say 90% of the t-shirts in the crowd were Metallica t-shirts. It's like their following was beyond devoted. And I think this album, I think they lost some of the devoted fans because they took this sort of relatively mainstream route. But yeah, they changed music with this album, and I say that really sincerely. No hyperbole. They changed modern music just as much as Prince did, just as much as Jay-Z did. It had a tremendous impact, and it's left a mighty footprint. And also, they seem like really nice blokes now they're sober.
I think that's probably true of a lot of people who are around in the 80s and 90s. Is I think that's where some stuff got really quite poor because a lot of people were quite strung out. I think with the scale of success, especially if you've got a US following because of the size of that.
I was just starting to work on my getting strung out, but I was just an apprentice, you might say. So, onto your last album. I mean, I could say it's predictably Welsh, but is it?
Well, I don't think it is. If I picked sort of just enough education to perform or something like that, if I picked that period of the Stereophonics, I think it would have been more obvious because those tracks are rooted in their childhoods, in where they're
Yeah.
from, and I've sort of got cult status in Wales as a Welsh band. But actually, this Language, Sex, Violence, Other album, this is after I forget his surname now, but Stuart the drummer had left, and obviously he sadly died. This is the period where they had a different drummer. It was after they had Dakota, which was quite a different feel in terms of what they were doing. And it's a different there's a different quality to the album that isn't quite like the other. I mean, you've still got the very distinctive vocals and kind of some of the feel to it, but it's just a different sort of thing. And again, there's just the thing I find with albums a lot of the time. I mean, like I say, not like I'm unique in this sense, but sometimes there are several tracks that you like, and there's quite often tracks that you're like, well, especially these days with streaming, there's a lot of meh sort of album tracks, and some people will like them, some people won't. They're almost filler. Because did Adele have that dispute about how you were allowed to stream her last album, I think it was, because there were tracks that were album tracks and she didn't want them played out of order and all of this, which is sort of, as an artist, I'm sure that makes a huge amount of sense. I've 0% talent in that space at all. But I don't often find there are albums where I like pretty much everything on there. And this is one of those albums where I really like so much of what's on there. And again, in terms of the musicality of it, they're quite different. So, Superman Brother and Rewind, quite fairly different to each other. Rewind I listen to quite a lot. It's just something about it that I really enjoy. I just think it's a great album. And I probably didn't. I'm a little bit averse to things that become really popular. So I've never read Harry Potter, never watched the film, and for some people that's a heresy, right? I just can't. I just can't engage with it. And once things become really popular, I don't know, for some reason I'm just cranky and old. I just don't want to engage with it. So like when Breaking Bad was massive, I wouldn't watch it, and then years later when I don't know if we already had Netflix, but we had Netflix anyway. And I'd probably just made the conversion from Love Film and having a DVD, posted to me every 2 weeks or something. I'd probably been as slow as that.
Good times.
Yeah, they were. Well, not if it was scratched, it wasn't, which happened more than once. In Bruges was ruined for me the last 20 minutes of that, where I had to wait another fortnight to find out how it ended. But I remember watching Breaking Bad then, thinking, "Oh, this really is very good." I've missed out here, but I'm still resistant to it. So there are plenty of things that, like, so when the Stereophonics were really, really big, it's all, you hear it all the time. I thought they were really good, but I wasn't into it. And I was a bit resistant to it. And when I heard, I'm not sure which track it was, I think it was Rewind off this album, I went, oh, I really like that. And then I got the whole album, and I went, oh, I actually like a lot of this. And it's one of those albums that I will listen to all the way through, which I don't do very often these days. It tends to be way more eclectic than that, but I think it's a brilliant album.
So it was a
I think it's
gateway
just good
drug for
listening.
you.
I don't know if I go that far, but it's very enjoyable.
Okay. Well, there's 3 albums. So that's Spaghetti Incident by Guns N' Roses, Metallica, and Language, Sex, Violence, Other by Wales's own Stereophonics. I actually, if I had to pick a Stereophonics album, I'd probably go for the first one. But I think that's age related and well, it's like you form a bond because of something that's going on in your life with
Yeah.
music. I mean, that's where the love comes from, isn't it? And that first album's got an important little song on it for me. Good times and terrible times. Books. Now I'm gonna stick my neck out here. I'm gonna say you're not gonna pick Harry Potter books.
No, I'm not.
Okay, bring it on. What you got?
This is quite hard to do because I've read a lot of series of books, and I wouldn't pick a book out of the series because it wouldn't make any sense.
You could. People have chosen a series.
Yeah, well, I mean that would need more than three. I mean, I'll tell you what the series would be, and then I'll pick one out of it. So all of the Lee Child books I've read, and the thing I would say about the Lee Child books, so Jack Reacher is, I came to that before it was quite as big as it is now. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't, I probably wouldn't engage. But there's a little bit of, I'm not sure it's not the same book 20 times over, but I really, really enjoy them. Karen Slaughter, I think, is phenomenal. She's written again two different series: Joe Nesbo, Michael Connolly. Probably the one I picked was Robert Crais, Crais, and he was originally a TV writer. And I think he did Hill Street Blues and a few other things. He lives in LA, and he has repeatedly refused to ever have his books turned into television or film, which is really quite unusual for what is a very successful series. And his Elvis Cole and Joe Pike books, which I think the first one must come out in the 80s. It's called A Monkey's Raincoat. And he says himself, like he's not ashamed of his early work, but he doesn't think his early work is as representative as he got a few books in. And having read them all, I'd say that's true. There's something about them that I think is, so it's set in LA, which it's a place I've never been to. And obviously loads of stuff is set in LA, but they're quite witty but serious at the same time. They're crime detective novels. They have got a bit of, they've got sort of life story in it, and they're not, again, they're only slightly, I would say, because he is very well followed, slightly off the beaten track in terms of typical series that loads of people read, and I really enjoy it. And he's not a book factory like a lot of authors are. He's not churning one out every 6 months or 12, certainly every 12 months. It's a little bit slower than that. So I almost appreciate it a bit more when it comes. And he doesn't feel the need to make it 600 pages. Like J.K. Rowling as Robert Galbraith, I really enjoy the Cormoran Strike books. I think they're brilliant. But, they are long and they are really good. But they're a very different experience to this. So I really like Robert Grace, and I think he's maybe slightly underappreciated. and he's quite an interesting follow on social media as well. Um, if you've read the books, it kind of works when you sort of see that.
I have. I've actually read all of those.
Have you really?
I have. And I thought the really interesting sidestep that he did was the Joe Pike standalone ones.
Yeah.
Because you think, this is a character who doesn't talk much. where's he gonna go with this? But actually, they worked really, really well. He's an absolutely solid writer.
Yes, but don't you think Joe Pike has got? There's a bit of Jack Reacher's got a bit of Joe Pike in him, isn't he? Because
Well, all of the great double acts in modern detective fiction have this. It's almost like it's almost like an alter ego who can do things that they can't do. So, like Elvis Cole has Joe Pike. Obviously, Jack Reacher does whatever the fuck he feels like. This is gonna really bother me now. Myron Bolitar has I can't remember his name now.
no.
Windsor Horn Lockwood III, if I remember correctly. That's another terrific series, similarly witty and evolves in a similar way. Very, very good. And a lot of them have this sort of. I want to say the protagonist is often the moral counterpoint to this other figure who. This other figure provides your sort of emotional closure in the book, and I think Pike does that quite a bit. Pike's the guy that makes sure that regardless of what Elvis does, regardless of his moral choices, Pike's the guy that makes sure that you get emotionally satisfied at the end of the book, so to speak. He's your happy ending kind of.
Yeah, I think what I like about the series as well, though, is his blurb, the author's notes when I first read them, and it had been in the Monkey's Raincoats. It was the first one, and I read it, and he sort of said, I'm not. This isn't as representative of my work, but I'm kind of not ashamed of it. I'm trying to distance myself from it. I thought that was really interesting, actually, because you do see how he evolves as a writer. I don't overthink it a bit, but largely I read them because I enjoy them, and I don't want to overthink it. But I think they're just really enjoyable. I mean, all of these things, you kind of, when you said, pick these things, I think they're all things that I just enjoy. And, the next book I've got is actually, weirdly, a book I really didn't enjoy, but stuck in my mind forever and a day after I read it.
Okay. What is your second book?
Joseph Heller, Catch-22.
Oh, wow.
I really didn't enjoy it. I hated it all the way through. So I can't remember how long ago it is. It'll be decades now, right, that I read it. And I went through this phase that I have reasonably often. But this was slightly different. Every now and again, I think you must use local libraries. Because if you don't lose them, they'll disappear. And I think they're so important for lots of different people. And my grandmother used to take on a Saturday. I used to stay over on Friday night for a while, and we would go to the library the next day. Now it's not like then that was the start of my journey in any particular way, because she would literally just drop off a stack of Mills and Boon books and pick up another stack of Mills and Boon book, and that was it. My involvement was no greater than that, but I loved going to the library. It's a beautiful old building that isn't used as a library where I live anymore, but every now and again I would think, well, I must use libraries, and I still do it now and then. Kind of opening hours get in the way, especially when you're busy and stuff. And I went through a phase where I wanted to read classic books, or books that were well regarded that I'd not read, and I felt really deficient that I hadn't read some of these. And I don't think people should feel like that, actually. I think you should just read what you like, and I don't feel you should be under any pressure to have read certain things, otherwise somehow you're intellectually diminished. But I'd read 1984, which could have been one of my books, but that might play to a stereotype. And I didn't. I've opened the door now, but I'm going to close it. But Catch-22. But the reason I picked Catch-22 is I actually thought about it a lot more for a very long period of time, and I still do now. And when I read it, I remember reading it thinking, I'm just not enjoying this. I just don't see what the fuss is about. And I sort of read it all the way through, and a bit. I mean, this is an awful comparison now, and it's a disgraceful comparison. But when you get to the end of the film, The Usual Suspects,
Mm-hmm.
and they do that brilliant reveal where all the clues are lined up, and suddenly you know Kaiser Soze is. I finished the book, and I sort of remember sitting down thinking. I remember where I was at the time. I remember sitting down thinking, Christ, that's clever. And the characters like Dr. Nika, and there's so many things that stick in my mind that because he doesn't like flying, and they falsely put him on the flight list as being on a plane that crashes, and therefore he's declared dead, even though he's not dead. They argue, well, the paperwork says you're dead, so you must be dead, and then he's just hanging around the camp, and it's both funny, tragic, and so brilliantly describes the insanity of bureaucracy. And I mean,
And coming from a civil servant, that's like,
well, as a career bureaucrat, that might seem odd, and I don't, by the way, view that as appealing. I don't sort of think, isn't it great how bureaucracy could be so perverse? It's just the whole catch-22, because obviously you hear the phrase catch-22, and I'm not sure people when they say it really get always what it really means, but by the end of the book, in fact, it wasn't until I'd finished reading the book did I really appreciate how clever the concepts were and how it totally makes sense in that war context in Italy. Well, it wouldn't have to just be Italy, but Italy at the time, and maybe a little bit of a synergy for me because my grandfather served in RAF Bomber Command. Not that he talked about. I mean, he died when I was quite young. I mean, we were very close, but I was quite young when he died. So he talked about the war and his experience, but obviously not, the darker bits of it because I was very young. But there's probably a little something there that chimes a little bit, with a bit of consistency with things I'd heard about. I just when you read it and you think about the contradictory concepts in there, it does resonate today in so many things, and so many things actually in my career where you realize these are catch-22 situations where they are so deeply contradictory that you could see what Joseph Heller was talking about. The character Dr. Nika, I think, and what happens with him is just so brilliantly done in it that's probably as I came, and that's towards the end of the book where I started to sort of, and his wife gets his retirement benefits, so she doesn't want to kind of acknowledge that he's still alive, and it's just so ridiculous, but at the same time believable.
I've got a confession. There's only about 4 books that I've ever started and not finished, but Catch-22 is one of them.
And I nearly did that. I very, very nearly did. And I really don't like starting a book that I don't finish.
Same.
Like you, there's a handful that I think, there's only one that I can think of that, and I didn't really mean to. It just didn't sustain me, right? That I couldn't. I just didn't get to finish, and I almost gave up on Catch-22. But I was really glad by the end that I had read it, because I think. Well, I say I think about it a lot. That's overstating it. It pops up in my mind as in terms of the book I've read, year after year after year, must be maybe 25, 30 years on now, that I sort of still think, that was really clever.
Well, we have a friend of the podcast who's an author called Liz Hyder, and I was talking to Liz about a Will Self book. I think it's called How the Dead Live. And I cannot even begin to describe how much I hated that book. I mean, I absolutely loathed it. I made it about 30, 40 pages and I'm like, fuck this. Because it was a writer who just wants you to sit there and go, oh, aren't you clever?
Oh, right, yeah.
I was talking to Liz about this and she summed it up brilliantly, although I don't think the original line was hers. I think it was a mutual friend's, but she said, that's called writing from the neck up. And that's how I felt about Catch 22. I felt like it was written from the neck up. And I know Hella took 7 years to write it, which does seem a little excessive. I know it's quite a long book, but that is a bit excessive. I love writers that know how to use economy.
Yeah.
Like, Chandler, for example, and Robert Parker in the later incarnations. But also, my favorite writer is Kurt Vonnegut, who puts together the most beautifully simple sentences. And they're so simple, they must have taken ages. But they're accessible. They're totally accessible.
I mean, I read all of the Ian Fleming original James Bond novels.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of those are very uncomfortable reading. Well, even when I read them quite a long time ago, there's some pretty uncomfortable parts of that. But there is something tremendously classy. Accepting there are very, very different societal norms now. There is something about reading them how you put, because they're not. I mean, some of the films are similar. I mean, the Casino Royale film that Daniel Craig did. There's a complicated story about film rights as to why the proper Bond producers, or put it that way, made it so much later. That's one of the only Bond films that sticks very close to the original novel, including a lot of the dialogue. And there's a scene where he says the bitch is dead, and that's directly lifted from the novel. And I wasn't sure how they'd make a film that is so close to the novel, because so much of the novel is based around a card game. It isn't poker. It's baccarat. I think I might get that wrong now. It's years since I read it, but there's something that takes you to the time and the way he writes it, and some of it's overblown and some of it's quite unpleasant, but it you feel like you are genuinely in a smoke filled casino. And there's the opening lines of Casino Royale, the book, which he rewrote lots of times to get it right, is absolutely brilliant. It just captures it perfectly. And of course, then the very first Bond film, Doctor No, which is a couple of books in actually. Again, that's to do with a film a rights dispute. Was the first time that Sean Connery says Bond, James Bond, is in what is Les Ambassadeurs now, and I've been in that room. I went to visit Les Ambassadeurs maybe 2 years ago now, and I'm sure they do this with everybody that visits. They say, "Oh, this is the room." I did stand there quietly for a bit because it was a privilege to be in that space, because it's an iconic film series, but the books were hugely successful as well. I mean, the films made them more successful, but there's something about when you read those that you have to take them at their level for the time they were. They're quite short as well. And the last full book he wrote, which I think was The Man with the Golden Gun, you can tell he's ill, and it feels quite tawdry and sick. And I thought that was quite sad when I read it, actually. But prior to that, they are just fantastic pieces of contemporary. I don't know, maybe literature is not quite the right word, but there's something about them. They're so stylistic, and they capture a mood of, the mood that he's trying to convey, and you can see why that then worked as an idea for a film, which lived beyond the '60s, which the books could never do in that way.
Occasionally, you see these articles about movies that whose names were the cause of difficulty in translation. And one of my favourites is, in fact, Doctor No, which was translated into, it was part of its Asian release, was translated into No Doctors, Please.
Yes, I can imagine that happening. Well, isn't it? There's a famous Pepsi one, isn't there? Where Pepsi had a slogan which was Pepsi, come alive with the taste of the new generation, which must have been, that sounds very 80s, 90s. And when they translated it into Chinese, I think it came as Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the grave, which I don't think is quite what they were aiming for. well, the Vauxhall Nova, well, it wasn't Vauxhall, but the Opel, it couldn't be called Nova in Spain because that means doesn't go, which is probably not a great moniker for a car.
Well, isn't one of the other famous ones the Pinto in South America? Now, apparently, I believe it colloquially means small penis.
It's probably, again, not one that you would want for the name of the car.
I don't think so. No, unless you put it on your sexiest sports car, then I think fair enough. And you sold it at a real bargain price, so people couldn't help but buy it. That would make me laugh. If I ever won the Euro Millions, that's exactly the kind of thing I would do. I would develop a supercar, sell it at a bargain price, and call it the "I've got a tiny cock." But anyway, I got sidetracked for a moment there. Have we had all of your books? Are the Bond books your books, or is your third book?
Well, I think rather than pick the whole series, I think Casino Royale, which he wrote in 1952 and published in 1953, I just think is something that I've thought about many times. I just think it's brilliant. It started something that is one of the most successful series, if not the most successful series ever, and the opening parts of it are just fantastically well written, I think, as a piece of writing. And they're a series that I read. I actually read for academic reasons at the time, but I just think Casino Royale is, it's of its time, yes, but it's just great.
It's in. Now we move on to 3 movies. Whatever you like.
So follow the Bond theme a little bit. So, well, actually, there's a Bond film in there, and there's another Bond connection in here. And what was I watching? Right. So I ended up hurting my knee on the weekend, and so Bank Holiday Monday, I spent it with my knee up, all swollen and what have you. And I watched Seawolves, which isn't one of my films, and I thought there's a lot in this I recognise, and it had the same titles as Maurice Binder did the titles. Who did the very, very famous opening James Bond scene. John Glenn, I think, was producer who directed a couple of James Bond films, and you start to realise, and then some certain same actors start to pop up, and you're like, I recognise this. So on that theme, the first film I pick is The Battle of Britain, 1969. It's produced by Horace Saltzman, who is one of the 2 big Bond producers. It has an outrageously good cast. It has so many big names in there who don't necessarily all have massive parts. It's got Ian McShane, who must be about 190 now. God, how many things has he been in? I mean, he's still in the John Wick films. But it's got Robert Shaw, who was really big name at the time. Again, he was in Bond films. Gert Frobe, who played Goldfinger, isn't there? You've got Gert Frobe, or maybe he's in The Longest Day. But there's Carl, the guy who plays Stromberg. Is it Cole? Was it Jürgen? So anyway, it's escaping me now. Anyway, he plays Stromberg. There's loads and loads and loads of really famous actors in there. Michael Caine's in there; he's a relatively big part. And there are just so many big actors in there. And the really weird thing is, it's 1969, right? So this is, people talk about how well Star Wars aged. Star Wars is still quite a few years away yet in terms of technical development, and I think Star Wars aged, surprisingly well for what it is. And apart from a few scenes which are obviously done with glass plates and things to mimic explosions, it ages, I think, tremendously well for a 1969 film. And what I like about it is it isn't. I mean, yes, it's kind of a heroic British story of the Battle of Britain, but it represents the contribution of various other countries as well. I mean, there are some things, obviously, in 69 it decides to gloss over, but it doesn't particularly present the Germans in as stereotypical a way as you might imagine. It's a bit kinder than you might have thought it would be for given its producers and its origins, etc. And I really like it. The score by Ron Goodwin is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And the Aces High uh, uh, version that he did, I still listen to quite often now. I just think it's a brilliant piece of sort of orchestral big band. It's not big band, but kind of orchestral, big brass section in there. I think it's excellent, and it's such a good. It's such a good cast. And I think it's Kurt Jurgens I was thinking of. It's I still like to watch it now. I mean, I've seen it. I don't know how many times I've watched it, and I just think cinematically it's so well done. There's one bit in it I laugh every single time where Robert Shaw and Ian McShane are coming out of Robert Shaw's cottage like early hours. It's very early in the morning. Off they go to the airfield, and he closes the front door, and it is very clearly a 1960s front door and doorbell, and it sort of everything else I think is done really, really well, and it's just I find it really funny. Is it suddenly bursts the bubble with this glaring continuity error because everything else is very, very period, and then he shuts this sort of glass front door with a sort of a plastic doorbell on the side of it. That's clearly not from the time that they missed, but Saltzman made quite a lot of films outside of his partnership with Gabby Broccoli, and he also made the Harry Palmer films, so the Ipcris File and Funeral in Berlin, and then they made $1 Billion Brain, which is not a very good film, but it's got some brilliant lines in it. It's not a very good book either by Len Dayton, actually. But the Ipcris File, again, amazingly stylistic, which isn't in my list, but could have been. But the Battle of Britain, it's not for everyone, but I think the fact that it's aged so well, and it's got such a good cast and some brilliant sort of one-off lines that that are really, really well delivered. I just really enjoy
There
it.
was a period there where some of the really key stories from World War II were made, and they put everything into the productions. And most people that were going to the cinema at the time certainly remembered rationing, certainly remembered the war, etc., etc. So it was really important to do it respectfully and do it right. And there was less of a need for it to be propagandist. And a lot of the stuff that was done in the early 40s obviously had a propagandist edge, but also just after the war, there was still a heavily propagandist edge. And yeah, I think it's in that period where it's more like, while some things are glossed over, usually for dramatic purposes, it's I'm not going to say it's a documentarian approach because it's really not. It's really massively grandiose and emotive, but it is because the audience was a generation that knew full well what had happened. There was, it was more of a let's just tell a story in the best way that we can. Let's not fuck about. We haven't got to convince anybody of anything. Let's just let the
I
story be the
mean, but
story.
what it does as well is you've got big characters in it who die, and that wasn't necessarily all that common up to. I mean, obviously it happened, but it the Germans come across as being. I mean, it's not entirely sympathetic. Let's be honest about it. But the Luftwaffe in it come across as being really quite badly let down by their leadership. They're clearly bumbling idiots. The pilots are very brave and losing their numbers one after. And you see, I mean, it's very colour by numbers. The psychological toll of it. I mean, it's not the sort of film you'd make now, but it'd be done very differently. But I like the fact that it isn't quite as simple as a first watching might tell you. I mean, it's not like Das Boot, which came in the 80s then, which again, it's just absolutely brilliant, really, really, really brilliant film, and it was serialized on TV, and I remember watching it, and it's that obviously is a very different telling of in that case the Battle of the Atlantic, and it's done very differently. But Battle of Britain sort of it tries, but it's just an epic, right? I mean, you can just watch it for the cinematic, scale of what they pulled off. It must have been really expensive to make because there's an awful lot of aerial work in it and huge cast, etc. I just think it's a good watch.
It's all it needs to be at the end of the day. So,
Yes.
what is your second film?
Goldfinger.
Crikey.
I think it's an all-time cinematic classic, and it's absolutely ridiculous, but it's got everything. It's got absolutely everything in it. I think Sean Connery by this time is really comfortable in the role. It's got Odd Job. It's got Goldfinger himself, the Gold Rolls Royce. It's got the Aston Martin DB5. It's got
It's
all of those
probably,
things.
you could probably say it's the first step towards Bond as we know Bond today.
Yes, absolutely, because Doctor No doesn't have a lot of those characters. I mean, that was made on a budget. It was released in drive-through cinemas in America. It obviously wasn't. It hadn't caught on by then. And From Russia with Love is grander, bigger. It's got sort of bigger villains in it. But Goldfinger is just on a completely different scale.
See, I thought you might go for From Russia with Love. And that's a big favourite of mine because it kind of, it's up the ante, no getting away from that. But it also, like the fight with Robert Shaw on the train, right?
Oh, fantastic.
It's incredibly well put together. It's grubby. It's nasty.
Mm.
I don't even remember there being any dramatic music in it. It's just grim.
I don't think there is any dramatic music.
I don't think there is.
It's just the noise of things breaking, yeah.
And it's peculiar for the time. It looks really peculiar now. But yeah, I think Goldfinger's the first step towards what Bond has become. But I prefer From Russia with Love as a film.
I just think it's the scale of it at the time as well, it's when they first start building really big sets.
Yeah.
So if you think what comes later with You Only Live Twice, with that phenomenal, volcano, rocket sets, which is, I mean, in his day, I mean, phenomenal thing to do. And also they did, up until sort of fairly recently, they did some really quite dangerous stunts themselves. And in You Only Live Twice, one of the cameramen lost his leg because he was filming from a helicopter, and a blade actually, caught his leg. So they it was serious stuff. But Goldfinger has got, I mean, it's relatively faithful to the original book. It's got so many famous scenes in it, though. The whole bit where he's on the table, and they're like, "Do you expect me to talk?" No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to. All of that is just classic. I mean, again, there are bits in it that you look today and you go, "Oh, that's really quite uncomfortable," and you wouldn't make it like that now. But there are just so many famous scenes in it, and it's just a spectacle to see. And I went to visit where they do the National Lottery draws, which is done at Pinewood, and it's done in a sort of a relatively small studio around in Pinewood, and I'd never ever been to Pinewood before. So we went in, and I was walking to where the studio is, and I just literally stopped and realised what I was looking at, because what's called Goldfinger Way is where they shot the scenes that are supposed to be in Switzerland, wasn't it? Where the Aston Martin's driving around the factory streets and then eventually crashes into the wall, etc. And those are the streets, and it's unchanged. And I got the phone out and take a photo, and people are like, "What the hell's wrong with him?" And I'm sort of touching, go, "Do you not know where this is?" Just because it's such an iconic film, and I went, "Oh my god, this is," and it's not any different, really. I mean, there's no Aston Martins or people with submachine guns, that I noticed anyway. And I just think it's such a classy film of its time. And
iconic is definitely the word.
and things have been imitated, so many times. And
well, I mean, Austin Powers came out 30 years after it. Like, how many things can endure satire 30 years later?
Well,
Not much.
you'd argue. I mean, there haven't been that many of them. You'd argue the Kingsman films. Are doing a version of it, aren't they? And there are lots of things that have imitated it, but it's just got so many memorable scenes and bits of dialogue. And as a film, I just think it's, as you say, it's iconic.
Yeah. Okay, good shout. Film number 3.
Blues Brothers.
What? Where did that come from?
Well, what's not to like about it? It's got an amazing soundtrack.
Really does.
And I saw it. When did I see it? I was a teenager, so I think I remember. I remember when I had a video in my bedroom, as people do. And like, my kids would go, "What's one of those?" And you did what with it? You put a
Yeah.
tape in it, and then the thing had to be on for you to get a. So I remember that I remember recording films that were on like at 1 o'clock in the morning and things,
Yep.
and I go, "Oh, I wonder what that's." So I'd record it, and I'd watch it the next day and stuff, and that was one of them. And I remember watching it, just thinking, well, "This is brilliant." I hate musicals. I can't stand musicals. I think they're the most unnatural form of film or theatre that you could possibly have. There is nothing. If you and I are speaking now, if I suddenly burst in a song, that would be weird. And why is that acceptable in a film? I mean, all right, you could argue there's lots of other ridiculous things in films, but people suddenly bursting into song about their situation, I find extremely weird. And the Blues Brothers doesn't really do that. It's just got a series of numbers that they perform as they go through
Yeah.
the film.
It's a crazy
Um,
adventure about musicians.
and they're phenomenally good. The soundtrack is amazing. There are some really big names in it. And I love Sweet Home Chicago. Peter Gunn theme. Who doesn't like Peter Gunn theme? It's cool, right? It's brilliant.
There's even
Um,
that little stretch in the movie where they have both kinds of music, country and western.
yeah, they do, and the whole glass bottles on the chicken wire,
Chicken
and
wire.
when they do rawhide, and they're like, oh, this isn't working, so they do rawhide. I just really like it, and I watched it again recently. I mean, obviously it looks aged now, but and obviously John Belushi sadly died not all that long after actually that it was made. But it's people still dress up as the Blues Brothers, even if they've not even seen the film. It's just something, again, very iconic. There are lots of little cues in it where you know what it is and you know what people are referring to. And I think, I mean, frankly, I could have picked the soundtrack as one of the albums because I just think it's really good and really enjoyable. And there's just a lot of light to it, I think, in the music.
I mean, people. One of the things people forget about the Blues Brothers is that it bombed spectacularly when it was released. People just didn't get it. Way ahead of its time, I think it's fair to say. And like John Landis, he had this purple patch in movies, and now looking back, Blues Brothers is part of that purple patch. At the time, everybody was like, "Holy shit, this guy's career's over." But it was actually that was one of the movies that benefited from the growth of video. Although the video didn't come out for a long, long time, when it came out, the movie had been talked about, been whispered about. It was such an event when it came out. So it needed an extra 10 years to kind of ferment.
It benefited from a bit of a cult following in the end, didn't it? And
Yeah,
there are a
totally.
few things like that maybe because actually when I watched the film, I, it doesn't make a huge amount of sense. I mean, obviously if you strip the music out, it's terrible. It doesn't make any sense really. But it's got these brilliant set piece musical bits in it, and as I say, Sweet Home Chicago is I just lovely to listen to. Um, and I was never very good, but when I say never very good, I'm not. That's not false modesty saying I was never very good, but I was actually quite good. I really wasn't very good as a brass musician, but I love listening to the brass section in things because I've got a little bit of an appreciation of you know the what it takes physically to be able to play at that pitch and volume, etc. And I just like listening to it, frankly. And there's just a brilliant bit in Sweet Home Chicago where they just keep building, brass and woodwind keep building on each other, and I listen to it quite often now. But the film, it's one of those iconic classics that I just think it just works, and I just like it.
Yeah, it's unfettered by the rules of reality, and so
it's ridiculous.
There's a real wackiness to it and a freedom to it. You can't possibly know what's going to happen. But as for the music, I mean, one of the key things about that movie and about the soundtrack is, if anybody here has never done this, I heartily recommend that you do this. Look up the musicians in the band. Oh my God. You've got the history of modern music backing John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. It's extraordinary. That band is incredible.
It's absolutely phenomenal. That's why some of the acting is really quite wooden, because they're not actors. I just think it's just really, really, really good. And it's a little bit, I suppose, like not the same thing. People have little cues from like 1984. We talk about Big Brother and various, and things like that. And there's a bit of that with the Blues Brothers, where it just pops up in different things, and people haven't necessarily actually seen the original. And there's been like spin-offs which I can't engage with, but
I quote it all the time.
It's a great one.
I do. I quote it all the time, but it's a bastardized quote. But like, if there's a stranger that I don't know and I need to get their attention, I will shout, "Mr. Man, Mr. Man," or "Mrs. Lady, Mrs. Lady," and that's totally Blues Brothers. Well, that's a surprising choice. I mean, it's a great choice. I'm not criticizing you here. And now I've got a fucking John Candy quote from the film. It's rattling around in my head. Orange whip, 3 orange whips.
Yeah, that's as soon as you said John Candy, I was thinking Orange Whip. He's got that lovely little cameo.
I mean, it's full of lovely little cameos.
In the big concert scene, yeah.
I always wanted to meet, this is going to sound really bizarre, I always wanted to meet Henry Gibson, who plays the head Nazi, because I've never looked this up. It's like I've never learned how to poach an egg, even though I love poached eggs, because I don't want to take the magic away. It's too easy to look shit up sometimes. You want to just find shit out because you met somebody and you asked them a question. I always wanted to ask Henry Gibson if that was his real name or a stage name, and if it's a stage name, did he choose it because it sounds like Henrik Ibsen?
I think you might have overthought this.
Maybe. I've been accused of that. But as Fenton knows, I'm a details man. Yeah. Maybe not. Right, okay, so we've got 3 albums, we've got 3 books, we've got 3 movies. 1 song. Now, the example I always use for this is that it's perfectly feasible that somebody would choose Eye of the Tiger if they were just choosing a song, but nobody in their right mind is going to choose a Survivor album.
No.
So what would your song be?
There were loads of different ones that this could have been. One that I think, what's one that's been consistent for a very long time, that I still like and listen to, is Simple Minds. Don't You Forget About Me. No, like deep meaning. Like, I don't want people thinking, oh God, this, self-obsessed. It isn't. I just, from when it was out in the 80s, again, I just really like the sound of it, and it's I just like the song. It's a great song, and I did get the album many years later, and there's I think Alive and Kicking is on the album as well. I think.
Yeah, I would think so. Is it New Gold Dream?
I can't remember now. To be fair, I might have ended up with the Greatest Hits album, which obviously isn't necessarily really a proper.
Still album. A great record.
Although James Brown's Greatest Hits, what an album that is! That is outstanding.
Yeah.
A really just
an album that sounds like a Greatest Hits but isn't. Otis Redding, Otis Blue. Like
it's probably because there's so many good tracks on there. That's the thing, isn't it? There are some albums that are like that.
But even back then, not that many. There's no filler on it. It's just every single song's amazing.
Oh, well, I mean, look, very different direction, but Madonna, the Immaculate Collection,
Yeah, but that is the greatest hits collection, isn't it?
is it?
I think so.
I suppose Immaculate Collection, it might be. Yeah, actually, you're
I
probably
might
right.
I might be wrong, but I think it is. I think it is.
wasn't
And
sure
given
it
the
was.
period that it came out, it would
Yeah,
make sense.
Yeah, you're probably right, actually.
But right. In terms so I mean I Don't You Forget About Me is obviously it's used very in an iconic fashion. There's that word again in the Breakfast Club movie, and the thing that a lot of people don't know about that song is that it was written for the Breakfast Club.
Oh, was it really?
It was written for Billy Idol, who turned it down, and they needed somebody to do it. John Hughes was a massive Anglophile, loved British music. And it ended up at Simple Minds' feet, and they were like, "We don't really want to do this. This isn't really what we do," and it changed their path completely.
Yeah, it's a massive song. It was huge at the time. I mean, I've actually never seen The Breakfast Club. With a comment, I know. I tell you what, I did rewatch the other day because I remember just how much I laughed at it at the time. Again, I'm not sure how well it's aged. It was Weird Science.
It's flawed.
Yeah,
One
it's
of the
very.
all-time great Bill Paxton roles.
Oh yeah, Chet.
He's phenomenal in it, absolutely phenomenal in it. If, in fact, you could argue he makes the movie. Anthony Michael Hall is always good value. The other guy's name, Ian. I can't remember his name. Last thing I saw him in was The Chocolate War.
He's not. He stopped acting not long after. He's.
Last thing I saw him in was about 1989, I think.
Yeah. He's. I looked him up the other day actually after I watched the film, and I went. I wonder what they're doing now. And yeah, he stopped acting.
And of course, going in a loop here, Anthony Michael Hall popped up in the last series of Reacher.
He did, which I didn't realise until I looked him up after watching Weird Science. I went, oh, he was in. I didn't because he doesn't. He looks quite different now.
He really does. He bulked up just before he did Edward Scissorhands.
Okay.
In which he's also excellent. But Weird Science, it is a funny one because Weird Science, it hasn't aged well in a lot of ways. No. It also has, and this is a real niche thing to know, but there's when the bikers come in and ruin the party, one of the bikers do called Michael Berryman. He's sort of bald, he's sort of a little funny looking to say the least. And for horror movie fans, he's like, he is a god who walks amongst us. He is in a very old Wes Craven movie called The Hills Have Eyes. And they shot it in the desert. But one of the things that I suppose you could call it a disability, I don't know. One of the unusual things about Berryman is that he has no sweat glands. And they were shooting this thing in the desert. So it's like, shoot a bit, stop filming, get ice. It's like unbelievable. Guy's a legend. Big fan of Michael Berryman. He's somebody I'd love to meet. But anyway, sorry, got sidetracked again there. See, this is about you, not me. Stop doing that. So, Don't You Forget About Me. You should watch The Breakfast Club.
Yeah, I probably have to now.
It is flawed.
I've seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It was a long time ago.
Oh, what a movie that is. And I know Jeffrey Jones has since turned out to be a bit dodgy, but you've got to separate art and artist because the principal is one of the great comic performances of the 1980s, as is his receptionist. Wonderful movie. But Breakfast Club, yes, I would heartily recommend it. It's a very unusual film with another one of the finest performances of the 1980s from the principal. You mess with a ball, you get the horns. Anyway, I see, get sidetracked again. All your fault. So, are you choosing a pet to have with you?
I'm really good. I mean, tropical fish, I'm not sure it would work.
There's going to be some of those around anyway, I think.
Yeah,
in the sea.
I think they're sort of implied. I do keep chickens, and they are.
Do you have a favourite chicken?
I do. Yeah, I do have a favourite chicken, but they're flock animals, so they'd be probably quite lonely. So that would that would be a bit unfair. but they are very therapeutic to when you've got chickens, because they just go about their business. They're always pleased to see you, and they recognise faces. They recognise their names and things like that. They're smarter than people think they are.
And dare I say it, delicious too.
Yeah. I mean, people go, "Do you eat chicken now?" I'm like, yeah, no, it's fine. I can separate out the ones I keep because I'm not going to eat those from the fact that I eat chicken.
I had a girlfriend when I was 16, my first love actually, 16, 17, probably 17. And I mean, she was amazing. She probably still is. But she was a vegetarian, and I've always quite enjoyed meat. And I was eating in a college cafeteria, eating away. What you got for lunch? I said, this is a shepherd's pie. What's in it? I said, well, it's shepherd's pie. It's got lamb in it. She's like, ooh. She's got a vegetarian mate with her. She goes, if you had to, yeah, could you kill a lamb? Could you kill a lamb yourself? I'm like,
No,
have you seen how small they are?
they're not
Wouldn't
that
stand a
size.
chance.
They're not size. They're not that size. That's the misnomer, you see. People think when they're eating lamb, they're eating
No,
lambs.
it's under 2 years old, isn't it? And they're pretty big by then.
Yeah.
And they've had a good life, probably. Although any vegetarians or vegans listening, I appreciate I am being flippant about the life of an animal. I promise you, I'm just being flippant. It's not heartfelt. I don't hate lambs by any stretch, and I buy all my meat as ethically as I possibly can, just in case. So, are we saying no to a pet?
Yeah, I'm a dog person, but we don't have a dog, so I always had dogs.
But this can be a pet from any point in your life.
Oh well, previous dog then Ben. I mean that would be weird because he's been dead for over 20 years. But
Yeah, but it's not Pet Cemetery. It will actually be Ben that's there with you. Won't be
yeah,
zombie
that one.
Ben.
Yeah. As long as it's not zombie Ben, that would be all right. Yeah.
Okay, what was Ben?
He was what we'd call a Heinz 57.
Big fan.
Yeah.
Okay, now did you have Ben from a puppy? Was he a rescue?
Yeah, he came from Dog's Home. He's a couple of weeks old. So yeah.
Wow, that's young.
He made a good. What was he? He's about. Let me think. He was about nearly 15 when he died. It was a good old innings, to be fair, for a
Yeah.
dog.
Yeah, with a probably quite a crappy start, definitely.
Very.
Mine would be my dog Millie, who's been mentioned on the podcast a lot. But she was a rescue. She was a mongrel, and she was 5 when I got her. But she was 15, and if it hadn't been for cancer, she'd probably still be alive. She's in great shape, apart from all the fucking lumps at the end. But what can you do? Okay, so we got Ben, and Ben will be fed, and he'll be able to help you catch goats. Are you taking an object? Now, when I say object, for me, might be lip balm, might be dental floss. Kind of like luxury item that would just make your life a little bit nicer.
I have a nice soft pillow, please.
Oh, that's a good
Because
shout.
I travel a lot for work, and I read an article the other day about it's about Tour de France cyclists, funnily enough, and it was all about no, it started off Formula One drivers. It was all about sleep patterns and how disruptive it is when you change countries and things like that. And in the article, it said that Tour de France cyclists. They have their own mattress, duvet, and pillows that are taken to each venue they're staying at that night so that they can sleep properly. Because when you go to a hotel, the mattress is slightly different, the duvet is different. Pillows, they said big pillows are the biggest problem because that's the thing that affects you most, apparently. And I thought, oh, that's not a bad shout, actually. So I think a nice, sort of decent, soft pillow. Given that it's a desert island, I've got food
Tropical.
and water, but it's tropical. But I mean, there's, a nice pillow would be good. I'm at an age in my life where I'm not sure I can just, slump to one side in the way that maybe I could have done in my 20s.
I went to I was staying in a hotel last week. I went to visit every Matrix at their new offices, which was very, very nice. And I was in this hotel, and I was probably about 10:30 when I got into my room. I was pretty tired. I was desperate to get to sleep. I fell out of bed, but about 5 times. Like
That's impressive.
once, maybe 5 times. What the fuck? Can't believe it. So if I were choosing, I might choose a bed with some nice supports on
You
the
can have those
side.
little rails I used to have for my kids when they were first in a big bed, so
Exactly.
they wouldn't roll out because there were no bars there anymore. I mean, that's a bit worrying, isn't it, John?
It was actually. I can only assume that the floor was very uneven in my room and in nobody else's room. It's like, well, I must have been thrashing around the bed for something. I must have been having terrible
Like
dreams.
you've eaten a lot of cheese before you went to bed or something.
No, sadly not. I'd had some beef. That was it. It's crazy. Almost embarrassed to admit it, but not so embarrassed that I'm going to go back and edit that out because I'm just not going to. Okay, one dessert.
So it is now, I think, a reasonably extinct dessert. I've been unable to locate it of late, which is Arctic roll.
Wow.
Why? Because it's a staple of, sort of 70s, 80s. My daughter thought it was amazing. Just it's quirky, isn't it? I mean, I really like ice cream. I like proper ice cream. But when you said a dessert, the thing that popped in my head, whether I wanted it to or not, was Arctic roll, and I thought, you know what? I miss Arctic roll. I don't know why. It's not the best thing that ever happened, but you can't get it anywhere now. I can't find it anywhere. Not that I'm like going out desperately trying to find Arctic roll, but you go somewhere, you go, oh, I've not looked in here. You go, no, there's no Arctic roll. Um, I
Can you
thought, why?
describe an Arctic roll? Because we do have some international listeners.
How would you just? So Arctic roll is basically a cylinder of ice cream, of vanilla ice cream, with a little bit of I'd be strawberry or probably strawberry, a very very thin layer of strawberry jam around the outside, and then sponge, not like the sponge you might use in the bath, but as in very very thin cake sponge wrapped around the ice cream, and you would slice yourself a piece of Arctic roll. So it's a roll, as in it's almost like an ice cream log, but with sponge cake around the outside. Which when you describe it, it's absurd. It's absurd, and how it ever existed is baffling. But now that it's gone, I miss it. There are things like that are gone now from my childhood. Alphabet letter sweets were my favourite, still would be, but they disappeared in the pandemic. They just stopped making them, and there was some very very poor rubbish imitation that they're awful. That I can't even choke those down. And
Fruit
I bitterly
polos.
miss them. Yeah, they disappeared as well. Spira, like those. I was pleased when they brought back orange arrows. I thought that was a winner. I like an orange arrow.
Do you remember crisps called Snaps?
Oh, vaguely, yeah.
It's a Walker's brand. Well, you should know them. They've got a dragon on them, for Christ's sake. I mean, it's practically Welsh. But what I learned, what I
Might be
lived in.
Chinese, which is quite different. But
No, it's got wings.
okay.
I was living in East Anglia. Well, I lived in East Anglia a couple of times, and I discovered that certainly back then, you could still get cheesy snaps in East Anglia. Rest of the country, you could only get the tomato snaps.
That's weird.
I know, right? Walkers, they're messing with our heads. They're telling us what we like. And it comes back in a circle again. We're back to 1984.
I mean,
I'll get
that
back
took
up.
an unexpected turn from Arctic Roll.
I really did. I don't know how you did
Kind of
that.
sort of.
Really weird.
I'm pretty sure I didn't.
You're the guest. You're driving this. So now we've got 2 pieces of advice, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so first piece of advice is from you now to yourself at a previous point in your life. You get to choose when you get the advice. What do you tell yourself and when? And why, I guess.
I mean, actually, when I thought about this, the initial honest answer was lay off the carbs. very frankly. And I probably needed that advice from the time I was about 20, and then probably every day for the rest of my life would be that would have been helpful. That would have been helpful to me. I think if I was trying to be a bit more inspiring than that to myself, I probably would have said, um, "Don't be afraid to take the chances when they come up, even if you're not sure." I've said to people before about, you know, jobs and careers and stuff. If you think, if you're 60% certain you could do that thing and you really want to do it, then you should back yourself. Because if you're 100% certain, it's probably well within the realms of what you can do, and it isn't going to stretch or challenge you, or develop you, or grow you in the way that will make your life better. And I don't think I necessarily held back, but I think about some of the opportunities I had when I was in my earlier 20s, where I was a little bit afraid to sort of enjoy the opportunity a bit more than I would now. I think I'd probably say to myself, don't take the chances that present themselves, because you'll be glad you had the experience, because you might not have a second chance. In fact, there are a lot of things you won't have a second chance. And I think I would probably, and that would be, I think, probably in the earlier 20s, because when you're a little bit younger, I think you just think you don't listen the same way, and you think you will do that anyway. As you get slightly older and you have to worry about paying bills and stuff, more doubt comes in. And I don't think don't do reckless things, but or things that you would obviously quite likely regret. But I think I would probably want to say that to myself, because I think you will always then have a few more interesting experiences and things that you look back on and go, "I'm glad I took that opportunity." And I got much better at that as I got a bit older. And I sort of realised that if I didn't sort of go say yes to some things, that I instinctively would probably want to say no to. That I would be glad I did, and that's definitely been true. And I think I would have liked to have done that a bit more when I was younger, and had that a bit more ingrained in me as I got older, because I think I would have done more things that I would be glad I'd done.
Very fair. Mine might have been don't worry too much about spots, you're still going to get them in your 50s.
That's inspiring.
Yeah, I think so. It's almost like a stadium anthem that Simple Minds might have sung.
Yes.
Don't you worry about spots. Maybe not. Now, the next piece of advice is from your younger self to your older self. And this is, I do think this is a challenging one. And also one that you weren't able to prepare for before we started recording.
No, no. You've got to sort of think about how you saw the world then. Because the thing is, I don't know if everybody else is like, I think a lot of people are. They don't really think of themselves being very different to their younger selves, just maybe with more aches and pains and ailments. Um, yeah, do you know what? That's almost too good a question. What would my younger self say to me? Um,
See, so I've become much more risk averse as I've gotten older, and I had kids quite late. And with the arrival of the kids, I've become much more risk averse. And I was having a chat with my bestie from school, right? And I said to her, I said, you probably don't know this, I said, but you have been the actual voice in my head when I'm about to do something really stupid that says, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And she said, "It's funny you should say that, because you're the voice in my head that says, what's the worst that could happen when I'm going to make a safe choice?" So I hope that's helped.
I think it would probably. So when I think back to when I was younger, what when you don't really know what your life's going to be like and what your opportunities will be, I think um, I would probably say, see as much of everything as you can while you can. which sounds like advice that you'd say back to your younger self. But when I was younger, that was what I always thought what I should do. I always wanted to have I wanted at that time. I thought I might have two or three different careers. As a phase, I would do something. Because I thought very very seriously about joining the Air Force. I loved aviation. I was in the Air Cadets. I ended up doing. I was a non-executive for RAF Air Command for 7 years. Later in my career, so I wondered. I think maybe so back then I always thought, it really, really should try and do as many of the things that I liked and I wanted, and not become boring and which I was boring then, frankly. I'm even more boring now, as listeners of the podcast will discover. But I think I probably would have. I think my younger self would want my older self to be sort of true to that sense of a bit of a sense of adventure that I probably thought I'd have when I was older. Because you sort of become busy, you become very busy, and you become tired, and you always think it's something you'll do later on. And a guy I worked with, was still in touch. He retired at 55, and one of the reasons he did that is he said he saw plenty of people retire when they were a bit older, and they lost their confidence to do things, which again is an older person thing looking back. But the younger version of me thought I would do a lot of those sorts of things, and I've done some of them. But I think that advice is, to encourage you to still think like a young person in terms of a world of adventure and things you should experience. I don't think would be bad advice. Most of the advice there was retrospective, going, look after your knees better, and don't be so fat, and don't worry about what other people think as much, and stuff like that.
Okay. That's fairly solid advice. I don't think anybody's listening to this and going, what? But I think, retaining some of the sense of adventure and freedom when you're young. I'm going to actually reduce this to a football analogy. I was watching the highlights at the weekend, and I've been a Chelsea supporter for decades. And watching Cole Palmer play is like nothing that I can remember experiencing before. I mean, Chelsea have had wonderful players over the years. Even when Chelsea were shockingly bad, they've had wonderful players. But Cole Palmer plays in a way that I find it difficult to describe. He plays like he's never been injured. He plays like he's never been coached. It's instinct and feel and imagination, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing seeing somebody play with that much freedom, and it's so rare. And I always remember when Paul Gascoigne was an England international, and widely accepted as possibly the most talented footballer that England's ever produced. He didn't go through the coaching system in clubs. He was 15 when he was found, and just played for fun and imagination, and that freedom had never been coached out of him. And that's how Cole Palmer plays. He's never been coached. He's obviously got some great technical skills, but there is a freedom and a looseness to it that we don't see all that often anymore. And we get these things drilled out of us. Got to do this, got to pay the bills, got to put some more work time in. I always say I'm not going to get to the end of my life and think, shit, I wish I'd worked more.
Nobody is really. No, and I think convention wraps itself around you, and that's true of so many people. It's not particularly deep, is it? Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all of that. But I think it's like when I talk to my son now and how he imagines his life's going to be. I try to crush it, because some of it's fundamentally unrealistic, that he's going to do every home and away Swans game and hold down a job and do, these things, and he's going to have this, that, the other. I mean, the home and away Swans games will probably destroy his spirit in the end, but
Crushing by itself.
but at least we didn't get relegated like Cardiff. So I just felt I needed to mention. But when I look at that, I think on the one hand I'm like, well, look, there's some practicalities here, but on the other hand I go, do you know what? I do know people who do those sorts of things that they want to do, and I'm not sure their life's worse than others because of it, and it's things that they want to do, and it's their freedom and holding on to the aspiration that they thought they'd have as to what their life would be. Especially as your means get better, you can do more of the things you thought you would do. Just sometimes because your means are better is sometimes because you're busier and working harder, and you actually have less time. And that is the one thing that you will never ever get back is time. In any, I mean, it's not very profound, but it's the one commodity that I always find myself wishing I had more of in any given day is time, because it goes rapidly. And I'm not sure if my mother-in-law stole this off someone else, but she says, this is years ago. She said this. She said, well, life's a bit like a toilet roll. I was like, what? She went, well, the closer you are to the end, the faster it goes. And I mean, on that note, I thought, yeah, that's true. So I don't know what you do with that, but
I'd probably add to it and say, well, yeah, and you can put your finger through the paper any time. She's a wise lady, obviously. I'll get my coat.
I felt you ruined the moment.
That's not the first time that's been levelled at me. Andrew Rhodes, CEO of the UK Gambling Commission, thank you for joining us on Desert Island Discs and sharing your choices.
It's my pleasure.